am on the technical advisory board. Oh, thanks. Yes, I'll start over. I'm Gretchen. I'm on the technical advisory board along with Raphael. We're going to be presenting to you today the summary session. It's this e-seminar that we're doing for the last RDA Plenary 20 that was held in Sweden. It was a really nice meeting. And also a big thanks to our secretariat and people that are, help support this effort. So let's see, the other thing just to remind you is that this last plenary was a celebration of our 10th anniversary. So you'll see a few things about that as well. The people that have contributed to this, putting this together from the tab are, in addition to myself and Raphael, Ming and Sarah Jones. They gave an earlier session today for those in a different time zone. And both that session and this session are being recorded, and you can watch them later or share them with your friends. So we're going to give you an overview of what happened at the Plenary 20. And what we did is we went through and we collected highlights from the key outputs of different sessions. We're not covering everything with the actual plenary sessions themselves, but these are largely focused on what the interest groups, working groups prepared and shared. And it's all structured by what we call a pathway, a plenary pathway. So we've kind of organized it and synthesized the information to try to communicate best to you what went on at RDA at this particular plenary. So moving on, again, this was a really great meeting. I had the pleasure of getting to attend along with Raphael in person. It was one of our first big meetings in a while. It was hybrid. So we had 719 participants. Most of them were on site, but we still had a lot of people, 230 participate online. And many countries, 62 countries across all the different regions. And it really is just, was just a great showing for the RDA community, this global effort of coming together to talk about research data and everything related and going on about it. There were also 13 co-located events going on at the same time. And I know a lot of people were going between the plenary session and some of these co-located events. So it was quite a lot of activity. It was in Gothenburg or Göteborg, if I'm pronouncing it right. And it was a lovely venue, and we learned to ride the ferry system across the waterway to get between certain locations during the week. So of the 53 RDA sessions, there were 7 plenary meetings where everybody comes together. And then we had 46 breakout sessions, 8 BOFs, which are birds of a feather session. So those are like new topics that people are trying to come together and figure out their common themes that people feel are important. 20 interest group meetings, 10 working group meetings, 7 joint group meetings. And a joint group is where you might get interest groups and working groups or some combination of them to come together and host a session jointly. And then 1 community of practice. This is a new type of group in the RDA. So you can see this link here and go to all the plenary highlights. And this slide set and all this will be made available to you. We'll send it out through the RDA mailing lists. So looking at the statistics and the metrics, you can see all of the distributions. The interest groups were, again, probably the biggest contributor to the sessions, but it's quite a spread here across all the different kinds of sessions that were hosted. And again, if you're just looking at attendance across the countries and the continents, you can just see relatively most of the people on site and about 1/3 of the people were online. And the hybrid had a lot of challenges to it, but it worked quite well. And our hosting organization did a fabulous job in supporting our sessions there. So big thanks to the host. Again, it was like the RDA 10th anniversary, and we had a lot of nice community building activities. You can see on the left, sorry if you weren't able to attend and enjoy the birthday cupcakes, they have the little RDA logo on them. We saw some really nice Swedish musicians come out at the dinner. It was lovely, and theatrical, and some dancing too, as well as just fun music. And then there was this rainbow board with the ideas, contributing to what kind of strategy, and anybody and everybody could participate. And then there's this other coming together of groups like the RDA ambassadors and things that was going on at the same time at the meeting. So it was really quite a lot of community building going on in person there. Some other highlights here, you can see Hillary, our Secretary General. She gave a very nice opening as usual and closing. Um, so it's always nice. And then we had also some industrial participants at the meeting. There's a cute little, I'm not sure who all of the people were involved, but it was really nice to see industry coming in to support this great organization, and becoming involved in our vision. There were also a lot of really nice thought-provoking keynote talks. At the end, we heard a lot about the Swedish AI initiatives that were going on, and that was a really nice way to kind of wrap up the week in the meeting. Very thought-provoking. As the highlighted tag here says. And then looking ahead and looking back, we saw some or heard some really nice things about how RDA, like what were the early visionaries thinking about when RDA first formed. And then we heard from people like Connie in our secretariat thinking about what kind of community engagement activities are we going to do looking forward, and just it was just a really lovely exchange with those panel members. Um, if you want to go see some of the activity that was going on, there was a lot of tweeting with Twitter. You can look at the hashtag RDA Plenary, and you can see it some of the exchange that was going on. So now I'm just going to start diving into a little bit more of the details of the session summaries, and this is how we're going to break it down. What we've done is we've synthesized the highlights that were shared by the session chairs. We had a lot of contributions this year, many more than the previous plenary, so great job to all the co-chairs from all the groups. So I've gone through the intro, and then I'm going to spend a few minutes going through the first few pathways: fair, care, and trust principles, data infrastructure, and training pathways. And then we'll have a pause for Q&A time. And then I'm going to pass the baton over to Raphael, and he will talk of, gives the summary of some of the other pathways, the data lifecycle semantics, and we'll close out and get your feedback. All of the collaborative notes from the RDA sessions. So I don't know if you were there or if you've hosted one of these sessions yourselves, but the nice thing about the way it's set up is that each session has a accessible link that's called the collaborative notes sections, and you can actually go there for each of the sessions in the plenary and read and learn more details, but we're pulling out highlights that were captured in those summaries. Okay, so the way the pathways are laid out is these are the names of each of the pathways. So you could see fair, care, and trusts is breaking down into what are all of these principles, and then what kind of adoption, implementation, where are they being deployed, and how do those principles actually translate into deployment. Data infrastructures and environments. That is divided into, are you looking at your local institution, regional? Are you looking at the large international global scale pathways? And you'll see throughout the sessions, there's a lot of overlaps. And we explain that. So not everything fits in just one pathway. Sometimes a session will straddle or be applicable to multiple pathways, but these are intended just to help people organize. And during the plenary, if they want to follow a particular type of theme, these pathways are there to help guide people attending the plenary. And then there's training and stewardship, which is very important. Data life cycles that involves like everything from versioning to the provenance, citation, and what are the rewards and incentives. Semantics, ontology, standardization, all things metadata. Discipline, there are a lot of interest groups and working groups that are discipline oriented, or space, environmental science, for example, chemistry, of that nature, engineering. Have to put a plug in for my own interest group. Um, and also a really big emerging area, we talk about the Research Data Alliance, but data is not all there is to this story. Software is part of the ecosystem too. So there's a lot of new activity going on with research software, as you'll see. And this is how the sessions were split up. You could see that we have a lot of summaries provided across, and you can just see the distribution for all the summaries. We had a lot of significant contribution in the area of implementation for Fair Care Trust, as well as data infrastructures and environments, especially in the regional and international areas. And then you can see here on the very right column that there's different types of sessions, whether it's interest group, working group, a BOF, joint sessions. We had lots and lots of joint sessions in data infrastructure. And we also had the community of practice giving presentations. And you could see there's a community of practice session, but you can see where it falls in both fair care and trust, as well as discipline focus. And that's the agricultural community of practice. Okay, so I'm just gonna jump into the first pathway, fair care and trust, and it has two tracks to it again, the principles and adoption. So right here on the first page that I'm sharing with you, when you see the blue, those are the sessions we're gonna report out, and these are the ones that the session chairs provided takeaways or summaries of. Some some sessions did fall into this category that didn't have the session summary provided, but we did see a lot, again, a lot of that. So of the Fair Care and Trust principles, here are the three summary sessions that I'm going to report. For the first breakout three, when you see the BO here, that's a breakout session. So this was the third breakout session. There was FAIR for machine learning. And this meeting aimed at setting up a roadmap and coming up with a community practice and writing this FAIR for machine learning white paper. And obviously there's lots of concerns and discussion around ethics, um, in machine learning, and how does FAIR actually apply to machine learning and vice versa. In the fourth breakout session on the software source code policy and incentives, there, as I mentioned earlier, just explaining the agenda, there's a huge growing interest in research software and a lot of initiatives and incentives. So there is this new guideline that was put out that is called Fair for Research Software. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, but it's getting a lot of adoption and take up, and it's aimed at academic publishers as well. So lots of discussion about that. In the seventh breakout session, Trust Principles and Certification, that focused on promoting updates on trust. And there's also this RDA Tiger Working Group, which is coming up with, it's another special working group to talk about the trust principles. And there's new requirements for the core trust seal and the trust principles outreach and adoption that is aiming to be worked on in a new working group. So if you're interested in participating in this, keep your eye out for this new working group. Some of the common themes that were in the fair, care, and trust, we're talking about how does fair apply to more than objects through fair digital objects? How does it need to be specified? And there was quite a lot of lively discussion in the fair digital object sessions. The other thing was fair. How does fair really apply to across all the different contexts, whether it's virtual research environments, the VREs, or software or machine learning. So it really takes on a different form in these different contexts. And then with RDA, there's a lot of interest in how do we promote and endorse adoption of the outputs coming out from these various groups. So anyway, those were the common themes from those pathway sessions. I'm going to move along into now the Fair Care Trust adoption, implementation, and deployment. This was a big area, 15 sessions, but fortunately for your benefit, I'm only going to share out one session here because lots of summary sessions were provided, as you could see here in this list, but several of these are reported out in some of the other pathways. So you can see example, this is the second one is in semantics. We also have discipline pathways, research software, data life cycles. So you'll see those later when Raphael gives the report of those summaries. So moving along to reporting out this first thing. Oh, sorry. This slide just shows there's, again, many, here's the rest of all the sessions that are not reported out. Again, there was a long list of 15, and there was only one without a session summary, without a takeaway. So many you'll hear about throughout all the other pathways. Okay, but for this particular summary for the breakout for education and training and handling of research data, going from the classroom to practice, integrating education and training and handling of research data. There were a lot of themes about creative ideas for how do you do this kind of education and training. And the analogy was given like hiding the vegetables in the zucchini bread approach. Also ideas about how do you do creative gamification and a lot of ways for reimagining how to conduct training in this space. So there's a lot of things already out there, but how does it apply? And how does it map into the research data environment? So a new focus group is continuing to work on a specific application profile of the minimum amount of metadata you would need for training materials. So if you're interested, feel free to reach out to this particular interest group in education and training to learn more about this and to lots of creative ideas. So moving along from fair, care, and trust into data infrastructure, there's three tracks for data infrastructure, and there were a lot of sessions covered. So I will move along into that. At the institutional level, for data infrastructures environments, there were 6 sessions. 2 were the birds of feather sessions, and they were really interesting. They were talking about trusted research environments and exploring user-centered services. So again, if you see the bright blue, those are the summaries that we will share with you. The ones that are not in the bright blue are being covered in other pathways, as you might see here. So here are the four summaries, the institutional summaries. The breakout 3 group was presented the sensitive data contexts and disciplines and looking at different approaches to this. So what they've come up with in this interest group is a glossary of terms for describing sensitive data. And they had some experts in various data fields discussing what are the different types of sensitivities, what context do they play, and also looking across all these different fields, are there cross-cutting themes? So, one theme is data sharing is about trust. And, if you're going to share across different fields, data fields, especially in the area of sensitive data, you have to have mechanisms for trust. And they are working now and what is the plan for 2023, and they have a community meeting. There's a date still to be set up for that, but they're moving forward in this direction. The Earth, Space, and Environmental Sciences, ESS, there's a couple big projects underway. In the US, this year is the Year of Open Science. And it's a big initiative all across the US, and it's pretty big in this particular discipline area for ESS. And there's also in Australia, the Planet Thematic Research Data Commons. Um, so lots of activity. They're looking at complex citations and how do you coordinate ESS data preservation with scholarly publication processes. So lots of activity going on in this area, so much so that they're considering, is this ripe for a community of practice? It overlaps with a lot of different aspects of both RDA, but also some other regional group activities. And let's see, there's also, I think, some effort and struggle where they're trying to get visibility of those projects in the global, from the global South. So how do they pull some new participation into that area? Then for breakout 6, the role of middleware came into play for the research data architectures and research institutions interest group. So they're looking at how does middleware play a key role? And there's a potential here for building out more capabilities in the middleware. And one thing that they focused in on, there were several institutional examples that showed how iRods, that's one particular technology solution, open source, how is that solution being implemented as an exemplar in middleware? And they also factored in how do institutions cover cost for supporting middleware? And it's complex enough that they need to have these intermediaries involved, like data stewards, and educating and raising trust amongst researchers in this area. The BOF on the trusted research environments had a lot of similarities and collaborations, and they're considering drafting a charter for a new working group, and they're looking for participants. So if you're interested in trusted research environments, lots of collaborations going on, pay attention to the RDA email list about that. Regional and disciplinary, again, lots of sessions in this area, 14. We had several with takeaways that are reported here in blue, some without takeaways. I'll share 2 summaries here. Again, another long list that are covered in the either I've already covered it or they will be covered in other pathway report outs. So the fair data maturity model, this was a joint group, also with the persistent identification of instruments, PIDs for instruments. So you'll see this actually is reported out in another pathway too, so I don't want to talk too long about it, but they they're looking at how instruments, it's not just about capturing metadata about the instruments, but also capturing metadata about the process in which the data was collected. And so they were looking at that and also factoring in there's a PID inst schema, PIDs, persistent identifiers for instruments, how that plays a role. And there are also vendors come into play here because there's a lot of proprietary formats and from instrumentation. So vendors play a real key role. And then last session under regional, last session summary is this joint session, excuse me, a lot of talking here. This is a looking at building what's called responsible research and looking at how the SDGs, the Sustainability Development Goals, come into play for um, areas and organizations like there's a summer school in East Africa, and there's a lot of collaborations that are being explored here. So they're looking at, for the key takeaways, what are the shared experiences in this area of sustainable development, SDGs? What about the indicator data that goes along with this? There's a lot of shared information across these collaborations, whether they're south to south, north to south, and open access initiatives. And then there's this new ontology for SDGs. It's a semantic infrastructure that is representing some of the goals and targets here. So there was a lot of debate and insight shared about that. And following up, this is the last track of the data infrastructures environments is international. So there's just a few you can see 16 sessions, BOFs, 4 joint sessions, lots of cooperation here and collaboration across RDA groups, which is really great to see. So good communications there. Kudos to those co-chairs. But a few of the there were many session summaries and takeaways shown here. Again, a few in blue. Only a small number did not provide the summaries, and a lot of others are covered in across the various pathways here. So we won't do all of that right here. But of the 3 that I'll share with you today, the first is the GORC, which is the Global Open Research Commons. This is a really active area going on in the European Open Science Cloud. And they have an attribute model that they've developed that they're sharing. And it's applicable not only to like the global scale commons or regional commons, but also like individual commons. So they think that that's something going on in the broader interest group, but there's the working group itself that is trying to come up with specific outputs, and they have a planned deliverable on P21 coming out. So stay tuned for what they're coming up with in the reflections and document development. And there's a lot of activity going on between the Finnish forum and also the European, the EOSC development, and how that all contributes into the FAIR core for EOSC and GRASP OS. Another joint session was on community engagement, successes and challenges. And that looked into a lot of the successful efforts underway, the RDA domain ambassadors, data curation network, the Australian Research Data Commons. So they're looking at how do we get engagement at the broader scale, and what are the themes in visibility and outreach, take up, and sustainability. How do you sustain this all of these efforts? There's the takeaway here was kind of obvious, but it's important to call out that community engagement managers are really important and really critical. And they also think that there's a lot of great outputs coming out of RDA, and we need improvements. And how do we manage the outputs? How do we communicate, share, adoption or all of that. And the RDA, the plenary pathways are a good catalyst for some of this. And then lastly here, the third session summary here on the data repository attributes working group. They have a deliverable. Remember, working groups only have 18 months in life cycle, or the DROG working meeting. And they're coming up with a draft of repository attributes. And they're soliciting feedback for where they did in this session for more development. And they're looking at the different stakeholders and how they would use these repository attributes. So the early draft is looking really good, and they're working on improvement of the documentation. Okay, so some of the themes, there was a lot covered again, where lots of groups are working on outputs and adoption. There's overlapping activities. Sustainability, whether it's SDG or things like infrastructure, is a big thing. Commons models are still very popular. Community engagement and regional and international activities, especially with the organization like RDA. It's really great to see that in data infrastructures that we are getting and facilitating this collaboration across these larger scales, and it's effective. And so the last thing, not to shortchange it, but I'm talking a little bit longer than my time here, but is the training, data stewardship, and data management plans. So there's several takeaways that have been provided here in this. There were 8 sessions, 3 BOSS, lots of great discussions at the plenary meeting itself. So the breakout 1, code data, Raphael, our next presenter here, is one of the instructors for some of the code data schools and materials. They're looking at how to streamline the group processes here and also getting reviewers on the school materials. The breakout 4, birds of a feather, was looking at synergies between the national research data managements and the data stewardship networks. So there are a lot of activities here that the national networks can learn from each other. And they want to continue to have this kind of engagement, and a meeting like the RDA Plenary is great for that. We already talked a little bit about the first session summary here, and I will just, we had a oopsie overlap in some of our reporting of this, but just to complement what was stated earlier about the pittance work, is this is a lot of effort. And so machine readability and interpretability of the outputs of this type of thing for instruments and data collection processes is really important. And there was a lot of engagement in that session. So they're looking at this persistent, this pittance working group to continue activity there. And lastly, the Libraries for Research Data is supporting UNESCO Open Science recommendations, and they're promoting international multi-stakeholder cooperation. So there's a lot of effort there to promote common understanding of what is open science. What does it mean? What are the benefits and incentives and all the diverse paths people can pursue in open science? And these, I will stop there and just say that there's lots of common themes. Some of the groups reinvigorated a lot of discussion, especially with the in-person meeting. Global collaboration opportunities exist, both in and outside of RDA. So promotion is one big factor here, and relying on a network of partners for increasing training reach and improving its quality. And I am a little bit longer than my time, I apologize. But we can just stop really quickly here to see if there's anything in the chat, if there's any questions. We are saving time at the very end for some Q&A. And if anybody would like to put anything in the chat, we can come back to it later. So Any quick comments or questions here with the summaries?
So Gretchen, I don't see any
digest.
questions in chat that I will watch for those
Okay,
through
thank
the
you.
rest of the session. There's nothing as of yet.
Thank you, Rob. Okay, I will stop sharing and I will pass it over to you, Raphael.
So just 1 second. Let me share my screen. Can you guys see it?
Yes, looks good.
Okay. So as Gretchen said, I'm also not looking at the chat. So if anyone sees a question that we can, if it is a very important question, then we can perhaps stop in the middle and then, or we save it for last. But anyway, so continuing with the report on the pathways, I'm gonna go very quickly. Otherwise, we won't have time for a discussion at the end. So the next pathways was the data life cycles that covers versioning, provenance, citation, and reward. In this pathways, we had 9 sessions, 4 working groups, 6 interest groups, and 1 joint session. And we had 6 groups that 6 sections that reported takeaways. Okay, so I'm going to go briefly through this, at least for the main points on each of those. So the first was on the breakout one on the working group data usage metrics, and well, they wrote down that the takeaway that they could that it was important for this session is that opportunities can emerge from demonstrating the tools and services for measuring and tracking data usage is an important thing. More than that, resources are required for repository to implement the data usage tracking. This seems like a big one. And also that more research is needed on measuring and tracking the data citation. Okay, so moving to the next one, that was the Shark interest group, the sharing rewards and credit. So the group reported that the rewarding pathway is not very well known. Okay, so some guidance would be of help. And they also reported that they need to create, well, there is a need for the creation of recommendations as a global picture, including all stakeholders, not just looking at each individual at a time. Okay, so moving on. Next, we had the data discovery paradigms. So they reported an influx of new members, and this is always good. And they hope that they could have more contributions. The session was very, very live, and people, well, there was a lot of discussion. Yeah, so moving on to the next one, the data granularity working group. So they asked they asked for the audience feedback on the key definitions and guidance regarding metadata schemas, content, and policy. So they reported that they collected such feedback. So the one good thing that to note here is that there were 2 participants that volunteered to be adopters of this guidance that they are building, and they also reported that they see a lot of synergy with other RDA working groups, and this is a very important thing because I mean the plenary is more or less all about this, finding collaboration. Okay, so moving on, guys, I'm going very quick through the slides so we can have some time for better discussion at the end, right? So the next one was the data versioning work interest group. So they had a discussion during their session regarding complex data versioning issues. The participants stressed the importance of improving machine accessible to versions and linkage between versions. And this seems like a very important thing. There was also a suggestion for all related group to organize a workshop, joint workshop to discuss overlapped issues. So this also touched the point that the group is looking for collaborating with other RDA working in interest groups. Okay, the next one was the data citation working group, and they did a report on the adoption of their recommendation by the Ocean Networks Canada. Okay, they reported that their recommendations still seem to hold in any setting, and it should serve as a basis for more complex services. Okay, so the common themes between all of those groups' presentations is the pathway has diverse topics, each focusing on a different stage of a data life cycle. All group had positive feedback, which can help advance current activities. That means that all sessions they had like a lot of discussions, and all discussions seem to be very fruitful. The topic about rewarding credit were discussed in 4 sessions out of 6, so this seems like a very important theme. And all of the groups on that, most of the groups identified that there is a need for collaboration with other working and interest groups. Okay, so moving on to the pathways regarding semantics, ontology, and standardization. So within this pathway, we had 12 sessions. Okay, and all of well, 11 of those they reported takeaways. There was only one that didn't put anything on the collaborative notes, but I'm gonna just talk about this the ones in blue, right? Because the others have been covered in other pathways. Okay, so for the vocabulary services interest group, they reported that they are trying to keep the group alive and keep the monthly meetings and reinstate the Slack groups. So they are trying to improve their communications. And yeah, I think that's that. Next one is the National PID Strategies Working Groups, and that they reported that they are now finalizing their outputs, and that includes a national PID strategy checklist as a guide for countries looking to start and develop their own national PID strategy. So this is a very good thing. Moving on to the working with PIDs in tools. So the group reported they outlined use cases, explore challenges, and pull resources to provide reference and guidance to chart ways forward. Next one is the brokering framework working group, and they reported a collaboration with FairCore for EOSC and also the Fair Impact group, and both groups they reported a usage case. So they reported that they are preparing a formal output for adoption that should be presented at the next plenary. And they also reported some thoughts on follow-up working groups, especially a working group on governance of outputs, and also a working group on more complex cases. Okay, so this is also a very good thing. Moving on to the data policy standardization and implementation interest group. So the session actually outlined the output of February, a workshop that they hosted in February on the quality of data availability statements, DAS. The group seemed to agree that the machine readability of data availability statements is a very important area and should not be ignored when considering improvements. And they also, no, I think that was that. No, they had a call to action from publishers, so they would like to hear from them to get their feedback on code policy and things like that. Next, the I-Adopt working group, the interoperable descriptions of observable property terminology working group, and they are trying to organize a modeling workshop, probably a one-day event for implementers. And they pointed a future work that would be develop a service that takes natural language description, transforming it into an I-Adopt variable. So this seems like a very important tool. Next, the last one is the Open Science Graphs for FAIR data in interest group. And they reported that they are identify a core data model entities, at least the entities for the core data models for the framework for scholarly knowledge graphs. And they are opening that core data model for discussion and validation. I think is that. So the common themes outlined by all of those sessions was that interoperability and discoverability is a very important thing, especially when it touches the themes of schemas, crosswalks, glossary of terms, ontologies, knowledge graphs, and so on and so forth. Okay. Also, almost all sessions identifies activities to follow. This is a very good thing. There was this important discussion in almost all of the sessions regarding general versus domain specific vocabulary, ontologies, or recommendations. And one thing that most of the groups outline is that the machine accessibility and readability is very important. Okay, so the next one is the discipline focused to data issues. And okay, so for the IGAD community of practices, improving global agricultural data, they reported that they are trying to connect to the RDA Earth, Space, and Environment Science interest group for a collaborative session. Okay, and next, the Life Science Data Infrastructure interest group and Fair Sharing Registry. So they reported that they explored 15 existing life science infrastructures based across Europe, US, Africa, to asking the question whether or not those services they support FAIR principles. The interest group chair is supposed to move forward on the development of guidelines for FAIR improvement for life science infrastructures. Okay, next is the chemistry research data interest groups. So they reported an opportunity for cross-community collaboration on agreeing standards approach for describing samples in chemistry that align with wider initiatives. Next is the BOF regarding data representation in materials and chemicals based on harmonized domain ontologies. So the takeaway from this BOF was that they are going to try to they propose to start a working group. Okay. Next is another BOF, exploring user-centered services for collections as data at the Library of Congress, the LC. So their takeaway is that LC staff to follow up with Digital Repository of Ireland on cultural heritage image data. RDA working group. So they're going to follow up with this working group. Next, the staff to follow up with RDA Europe representative on possible next steps. Okay, so common themes again is that interoperability and standards for data and services with the discipline focus is something very important. And also, most of the groups, they identify collaboration opportunities with other groups within and also outside RDA. And the last pathway is on research software. Okay, so in this we had 4 sessions, 2 interest groups and 2 BOFs. Okay, so the first one was on software source code, and they reported that there are gaps in policy for software across the whole landscape of the software source code. Okay, and they said that there is a momentum building in several areas to build stronger policies and incentives. Also that there is a clear growth and interest in software within the RDA community. Okay. Next was the Fair for Machine Learning interest group, but I think Gretchen already did the report on this. But in any case, just to outline that they are very interested in writing a white paper on Fair for Machine Learning. Okay. Then we had the BOFs, the birds of a feather. The first one was coordinating mechanism for making code visible. So they asked for the participants to list existing mechanism that could encourage and support code visibility. Okay, they reported that there is good enough practice already, but there is a need to this to be widely and globally disseminated. Okay. Next is the computational reproducibility. What's next for RDA? And the group, the main takeaway, I think that for this group is that there should be a new activity in the RDA looking at this topic. Okay. One thing that the group discussed is maybe it would be worth reestablishing the reproducibility interest group within RDA. And the common themes is that there is a clear growth in interest in software within the RDA community. There are also a lot of discussions regarding software artifact citations, and also a lot of the groups, they reported well, they had discussions regarding software or machine learning models metadata. Okay, so metadata for software and also machine learning seems to be a very important thing. Next, we had well, some sessions that didn't quite fit any of the pathways, or the group didn't actually, the groups didn't point to the pathways that they seem to better describe the groups. So we had artificial intelligence and data visualization working group. We also had, in those, they discussed data ethics and data sharing. We also had another one on data policy. And so there was also the trusted research environment for sensitive data that has been reported in the data infrastructure pathway. Okay, so I'm gonna jump into the conclusions because we only have like 4 minutes. Just to outline some of those, there were BOFs in every pathway. So this is a very important thing, because it could spawn new working groups and interest groups and introduce subjects that haven't been very much discussed within RDA. So this is a very important thing. A few working groups identified potential adopters of their outputs. So this is also something very important. one key thing for me, at least, is that a lot of the groups, they reported that there is the desire to collaborate with other groups within RDA and even outside RDA. So I think this is a very important thing. This is something that we should take into consideration and try to build a platform that could help groups to connect to each other. There's also a need for extending the participation to other regions, such as the Global South. Okay. Yeah, so I think that the main question would be, was this pathway summary useful? Would it be beneficial to do it at the plenary? Okay, so this is a question for you guys. And well, I'm sure that we don't have the time for discussion, so we plan a few questions to generate a discussion. I'm just gonna jump over. Sorry for the background noise, guys. I'm just gonna jump the discussion points and open for questions if there is anyone that want to make any comment or so.
Yeah, feel free to raise your hand or just shout out if you'd like. We have a comment in the chat. It was useful, but I think it would be more useful at the plenary. And we've heard that feedback, and the idea behind this in the beginning was we really do hope to do this at the plenaries.
So Gretchen, let me say, if we did this at the plenaries, it would have to be much abbreviated. I don't think we could get an hour of time at the plenaries with the busy schedule. So the question is, would a vastly abbreviated version be sufficient?
Yeah.
And I'm
okay.
Somebody said they found the summary illuminating. So thank you so much for that feedback. There's just a lot of great activity and discussions are really just so much that goes on at the plenaries. Thank you.
And this bottom question is particularly interesting to me in the tab moving forward, is what topics did anybody identify that may have been missing or that you expected to see but weren't really being talked about at P20? And this will go into some things we're looking at towards gap analysis of what subjects RDA may be missing on that could be an area of engagement. Okay, we don't have a talkative crowd today.
Yeah, that's okay. Feel free, please, we encourage you to get in touch with anybody in the tab. Rob Quick is one of our tab chairs. He's here as well, joining us. Thank you. But topics missing. Oh, we do have one. I think here. Yeah, somebody said new levels of data analysis enabled by data sharing. More discipline focused. It's a good one. Yeah. Okay, well, thank you so much for your feedback. Thanks for attending today. We hope you found the summary useful.
So, Gretchen, I just wanted to make one final comment, is that this material will be shared with you, so you could go back to the slides, and there are links for the notes that the groups took during the plenary, so you can go through the notes and find more information there. So in a sense, I think that this kind of seminar makes a lot of sense after the plenary, because it summarizes. We try to give a summary of what happened, but we give links to the full material. So yeah, so you guys can come back to the slides and look for the collaborative notes and also the videos, the recordings.
Okay. Well, thank
Wonderful
you.
job, Gretchen and Raphael. That was a great summary. Thank you very
Yeah.
much. For,
And to Ming and Sarah as well.
yes.
It was a team effort.
Thank you both.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.